All right, let's talk about something I think we've all felt. You're in business, and it just feels like you're stuck in this endless, brutal fight for every single customer. Sound familiar? Well, today, we're going to break down a strategy for basically just walking away from that fight and carving out a market that's all your own.
I mean, you know the feeling, right? That constant pressure to just one-up your rivals. Every tiny win feels like this huge battle. And it usually turns into a race to the bottom on price or this super expensive arms race on features. But here's the big question. What if the goal wasn't to win the race, but to get off that track and run a completely different one?
Okay, so first things first, let's really dig into the problem here. Most companies, whether they know it or not, are caught in what we can call the competition trap. And man, it is a tough cycle to break.
And this is where things get kind of weird. The more companies fight tooth and nail to compete, the more they actually start to look exactly the same. You see this all the time, right? One company adds a new feature and boom, within months, everybody has it. The result? From a customer's point of view, it all just becomes a blur. The choices start to feel meaningless.
So if going head-to-head just turns you into a copy of your competitors, what's the alternative? Well, you have to shift your entire mindset. You have to stop thinking about competition and start thinking about a really powerful idea called value innovation.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. This isn't about small, incremental improvements. Value innovation is about creating a massive leap in the value you offer to customers. We're not talking about being slightly better or a little bit cheaper. We're talking about being so different in a way that creates so much new value that all the old ways of measuring success, they just become irrelevant.
And this chart really nails the difference in mindset. Traditional strategy is all about fighting for a bigger slice of the pie. But that pie is fixed, right? Value innovation, that's about baking a completely new pie, a bigger one. You're not just trying to steal your competitors' customers, you're actually creating brand new demand by attracting people who weren't even in the market before.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do it, right? Well, lucky for us, there's a really practical, systematic way to approach this. It's a framework designed to help you challenge every single assumption your industry is built on.
It's called the 4 Actions Framework, and it's built on 4 simple but seriously powerful questions. See, instead of just asking, how can we be better than them, you start asking some really tough questions. What things that our industry takes for granted should we just get rid of completely? What can we reduce way, way below the standard? What should we crank up way beyond what anyone else is doing? And maybe the most exciting one? What can we create that the industry has never offered before? It's literally a tool for taking your industry apart and putting it back together in a totally new way.
So to really see how this works in the real world, let's check out a classic example. Intuit, the company that made Quicken. Now, you might think they were competing with other software companies, but they had a really key insight. They realized their biggest competitor was something way, way simpler. So before Quicken came along, if you wanted to manage your personal finances, you basically had 2 terrible options. On one side, you had this super powerful but crazy expensive and complicated software. I mean, you needed to be an accountant to use it. On the other side, the good old pencil. Simple, cheap, sure, but also slow and super easy to make mistakes with. And the entire software industry was just focused on adding more features to beat other software, totally missing the point of why most people just gave up and stuck with a pencil. So what did Intuit do? They used the framework. First, they eliminated all the accounting jargon and the dozens of complex features no one actually used. Then, they reduced the price, like drastically, from around $300 down to $90. They raised the ease of use to be as simple as filling out a checkbook. And finally, they created something totally new, a piece of software with the speed and accuracy of a computer, but with the simplicity and low cost of a pencil. And just like that, poof, they made both of their old competitors completely irrelevant.
All right, so the 4 Actions Framework is the what. It's the tool you use. But the next big question is, where do you even start looking for these kinds of opportunities? Turns out there are 6 systematic paths you can explore to find that wide-open, uncontested market space.
Now, these 6 paths are like different pairs of glasses that let you see your industry in a completely new light. We're not going to have time to dive deep into all 6 today, but just to give you a feel for how powerful this is, let's explore a couple of my favorites.
Okay, let's look at this idea of looking across strategic groups. Now, a strategic group is just a fancy term for a bunch of companies in the same industry that kind of go after the market in the same way. Think about cars, right?
You've got the luxury brands like Mercedes and BMW in one group, and then you've got the economy brands like Honda and Toyota in another. The real magic happens when you figure out why customers choose to trade up or down between those groups.
Polo Ralph Lauren is the perfect example of this. They looked at two very different groups in fashion. On one hand, you have the super expensive, high-fashion designer stuff, haute couture, and on the other, you have the more traditional, classic brands. They figured out that people love the designer name and the fancy materials of high fashion, but they hated the crazy prices and the fact that the styles were out of date in 6 months. So what did Ralph Lauren do? They took the best of both worlds. They offered the designer name and the high quality, but they paired it with a timeless style and a much more reasonable price tag. They basically created a whole new space right in the middle.
All right, here's another really cool path, looking across functional or emotional appeal. Basically, every industry leans one way or the other. Some are functional, they compete on price, on utility, on how well the product works. Others are emotional, they compete on feelings, on brand image, on aspiration. And you can find incredible opportunities by taking an industry that's one way and flipping it to the other.
Think about the cosmetics industry. For decades, it was all about emotion. It sold glamour, hope, dreams in a bottle. And that meant huge costs for fancy packaging, celebrity ads, the whole deal. Well, The Body Shop came along and just flipped the entire script. They stripped away all that emotion and created a purely functional appeal. It was about simple, natural ingredients and plain, refillable bottles. They weren't selling you a dream. They were selling you healthy, ethically sourced skincare. By doing that, they created a totally new value proposition and a massive new market.
So as we wrap up, what does all of this really mean for you and your business? Well, it's about a fundamental, deep-down change in how you even think about strategy and where you fit in your market.
And if you remember just one thing from this, let it be this. The goal is not to compete. The goal is to make the competition irrelevant. The most powerful, game-changing moves in business aren't about outsmarting your rivals. They're about creating such a huge leap in value for your customers that, honestly, your rivals aren't even in the same conversation anymore. It's a massive shift from a mindset of competition to a mindset of creation.
So that leaves us with one final thought, a question for you to take with you. Take a hard look at your own business, at your own industry. What are those things that everyone just accepts as the way things are done? What are those unspoken rules? Now ask yourself, what could you eliminate, reduce, raise, or create to completely redefine the game? Because the next great market space might just be out there, waiting for you to create it.